Trigger warning, I am going to talk a little bit about the news media in regards to the sensationalization of child sexual abuse. So if that is not what you want to listen to today, please enjoy your scrolling. For anybody who's staying around, I've been sitting with this for quite a while. Honestly, my whole career, since I've been working with people who've been impacted and harmed by sexual assault and sexual abuse, and also work with the other side of that, which is the people who have created the harm. I hold a specialized license in Illinois for this. I've been doing this work out of graduate school. I started doing this work. So I feel pretty confident in my expertise to come on here and talk about some of this. And I'm not going to contribute to the polarized conversation. It's across all media. No one's really giving the correct kind of attention to these things. So let me tell you what I noticed first. I notice when a sexual abuse case comes across a network and they're reporting on that. Totally fine for them to do that. Sometimes we need to call attention, as we've seen, especially in celebrity cases. Bringing this out into the public then gives other people who might have been harmed the permission to kind of come forward as well. So it's not don't report on these things. It's the how it's being reported, because the sensationalized experience of this is a pedophile. You are not a clinician. You have not read the clinical psychological evaluations of these people. So right out the gate, just the words that you're using are important and they matter. And why I say that is because they matter to the people who have been impacted as well. Just outcasting someone isn't what I prefer to call like the people who've been impacted by these behaviors need. They need support, they need resources, they need people who are willing to understand. And when we vilify the person who's done it, and I'm not saying don't hold them accountable, and I'm not saying don't even dig into their history, their past. Like we need to call attention to this so that they can be held accountable in the correct ways and get treatment if that is what the psychological evaluation. I don't do treatment with anyone who's perpetrated unless I have a clinical evaluation. And for anybody who is in the court system, these things are required of them anyway. So why am I saying all of this? I'm saying it to get back to the point of the people who are reporting these stories, the people who are sensationalizing experiences, and specifically I've heard of like these pedophiles are coming for your children. Okay, that's scary. That could be a reality. Like there are people out there who could be focusing on your children. Piece of it that's frustrating is like you don't mean that about everyone who could potentially be a threat. You mean it about specific people that your network or your podcast are trying to get people to be aware of or be afraid of. What frustrates me is that's where the story ends. They end with fear-mongering and throwing out really large blanket accusations. And we also know that they're not holding everyone accountable. So when, for instance, someone on the police force has been accused of something, we don't see accountability as much. When lawyers or judges or other people of stature, politicians, when these people have accusations against them, we don't see the same fear-mongering. We don't see the same accusations being made. So again, I'm going to reemphasize this. This isn't about bringing awareness to things. This isn't about actually protecting children. This isn't even about like public safety. It's about what sells and what's sensationalized. And in a place where I know the number one thing that helps victims who've been impacted is being believed, being supported, and getting resources. So in none of these stories do I hear them focus on how can we help this person that's been impacted? How do we help this family? In none of these stories do I ever hear them focusing on, what's the larger problem? Why does this problem even exist? We simply are just demonizing and dehumanizing. And that's dehumanizing for everyone involved, because it's also very much seen as the victim being damaged goods of this perpetrator, of this monster. And so when we go in a little deeper, what I think the shift what I would love to see is, hey, public, we would like to bring this to your attention. There have been X amount of victims that have been perpetrated by this person. This is how this person's being held accountable. So instead of saying this person's not even going to prison, because I'm going to tell you two facts about that. One is a lot of the times they don't end up in prison. Sometimes they do jail time. Sometimes they do work release. Sometimes they are, forced to quit their jobs and be in home arrest and have to get permission from their officer to leave their house. Bottom line is they need accountability if they have created the harm and impact of sexually abusing or assaulting someone. That doesn't always look like going to prison. And a lot of times, in order to actually get them the treatment they need, they will be put on probation for anywhere from 18 to 36 months or more. They're not allowed to leave the state. They're not allowed to do a lot of things while they're on probation and parole. And sometimes we'll do a short sentence in jail, not prison. So be discerning about what you're reading. I'm emphasizing this because I think that when I hear news media say, and they're not even doing prison time, is well, they went through a whole court process. They got a psychological evaluation. They were interviewed by people. They had probably months and months and months and months of litigation where they were collecting evidence and data and impact statements and working with the victim advocacy if there's a physical victim, or in the cases of child sexual abuse material, going through all of their electronics and things to see to the extent of what harm was damaged. And so when you hear this, understand it doesn't mean they weren't punished or they didn't have consequences or they're not being held accountable. And in a lot of ways, I have had people tell me early on in treatment, I almost would have rather been sentenced to prison because this is so much work. We make them work on themselves. We hold them accountable, or we make sure that they have good coping skills and resources to move forward without harming people. And we have the stats that say this stuff works. I know that might feel triggering to a lot of people, but I'm here. I want to be honest about this conversation. So instead of focusing on what's helping the person who's been impacted, instead of hey, public service announcement, we want you to know these details for your own safety in case anyone else needs to come forward, reporting it like that versus a sensationalized thing because, this monster took away the value of this human is not a good narrative for anyone. The other thing that really frustrates me, besides not saying the true accountability that something has happened, you're just saying what didn't happen. And that leads people to conclude that they had no consequences then. Note that so that you can discern that. My final point for just this opening of this conversation is that we don't hear about what are the protective measures for children. And we're getting better at that. There are organizations, Safer Society, Darkness to Light, off the top of my head, are two really great organizations educating people. Parents have tons of tip sheets on their websites and that really want to prevent this from happening by having people actually be informed. What alarms me is that we are doing much better, but these organizations aren't being highlighted. And I actually just saw in Time magazine, Stop It Now is another one. So Stop It Now does a training program, and they were just highlighted in Time magazine, and this idea of we're really not doing enough on a large scale to prevent sexual abuse. We're just reacting to it. And this is the core thing that bothers me about the way I see media representations of these stories come out. You're highlighting a, registered sex offender does this, but you are not telling people what are the resources and the places that they can actually go for help on how to protect their children. Because in my experience, no one wants this to happen to their child or to a family member, and yet they don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. Most of the time, they're just doing control, which is I'm going to protect you from the things that I think might be threatening, and avoidance. Well, it hasn't come up yet, so I don't need to talk to my kids about it, or I don't need to worry about it. And the fact of the matter is that 90% of child sexual abuse is happening from someone they know. And I wrote a white paper on this, specifically on the problem of youth on youth perpetration, and that it's about 30 to 40%, and we also know that that can be vastly underreported. So what I've seen is that we're not talking about that. I am. I have a whole course about it, but we aren't actually giving people the tools. That's relying solely on the parents. And I can tell you, I don't know a whole lot of parents that are educated in this, that feel competent enough. If they do bring it up and their kid shuts them down, they don't know what to do with that. So parents are not feeling as competent and have the resources to be able to keep their kids safe in this way either. There are many organizations, I will put links to their resources page down below, but there are many organizations that are working on how to identify sexual abuse, how parents can have these conversations, and I really highly recommend. We do have to be age appropriate and think about what's the best way, but that's where Stop It Now and Darkness to Light and Safer Society, they have researchers and trainers and people who have been doing this work with families and with communities for years and years. So I trust their opinion over what I call the talking heads over in the media outlets. I'm also going to put a link to my course if you're somebody that works with youth and you want to know more about when these acting out sexual behaviors that kids act out against other kids. If you want to know more about that, I also have a complete course on that entire subject. I hope that we can just continue to have this conversation because it's so important to actually have the resources and the guides instead of letting fear, control, and avoidance guide you, because that's not going to protect children. If it does, it's happenstance. You just happen to be vigilant in that moment, but we can't be vigilant 24/7, and especially as kids get older, they need to have information for themselves. So if this was informative, let me know. If you have questions, let me know. If you want to disagree with anything I'm saying, I'm open to that. I don't expect that this is going to land the same way for everyone, and especially the same way as it does for me, because I've been in this field, I've been doing this work, I've been reading the research for a long time, and so I know that the emotional reactions to this topic in general, to these ideas, but I want to hear it. Don't just shut it down or unsubscribe. Just let me know in the comments, and I will be back with more information on this topic someday soon. I hope that you go take care of yourself, because this is a heavy topic. Bye.